All right, welcome back to the final 15 minutes, everyone. I mean, you guys were here the whole time, obviously. This is all just one day. Try and be flexible with your brains, please, because these poor people have had to be here the entire time straight through, and we're doing 2 different days right now. We've done sections 1 and section 2, getting the evidence and then arranging it in an order whereby you could actually write an essay about it. Now we're going to talk about writing the draft. So imagine the internet shouting under draft here. This is not an essay. An essay is the thing you hand in to the professor. Hopefully, from this day forth, none of you are ever going to hand in a draft to the professor ever again. So, this section is where you get from sitting at your computer with a blank page in front of you to 12 pages of semi-bullshit that once you do section 4, the editing phase, you could actually hand in and be proud of it. So right now, we're just going to introduce the general format of the essay, and then for the final lecture next time, I'll give you some tips for actually writing it, and we'll talk about the editing phase, and then we'll be all done. So, the way to think about the draft is that you're not going to hand it in. This is crucial because you're going to have to do some things for a successful draft that if you handed them in would be terrible. And the first is your argument is not going to be totally set until you have finished the draft. So when we look at this essay and how I'm going to suggest you format it, it'll look like this. Introduction, methodology, literature review, can't spell, and then a certain number of paragraphs / sections, number determined by the number of claims you wish to make, the number of sections you wish to make, that sort of thing. Conclusion, that's it. That's how a typical essay will look. And I'll talk about methodology and lit review in a moment. Assuming that you've hit the basics of how to write an essay, like never make a claim without direct textual evidence and analysis of that evidence, assuming all of that, by far the most important paragraph is your introduction. And here is how a research essay introduction should look. First, you're going to make your major claim. You're not going to do a general introductory statement like throughout all of human history, sex has been super important. You're not going to set the scene as if you were writing a journalism article. You're just going to make your major claim. Note that I haven't said thesis statement because at the 3,000 and 4,000 level or the graduate level, any argument that can be made in one sentence probably isn't sophisticated or nuanced enough. It might be, that's completely fine. If you're a very skilled writer, you could probably easily do it, but you don't want to leave things up to skill. You want a robust method. So you're going to make your major claim. You are going to say why it's significant, and by that I mean it's significant to the understanding of the text. You're going to gesture to the kind of evidence you're going to use. So you don't want to just list all the evidence you're going to use because the introduction would be 10 pages long, but you want to establish your credibility. You want to especially if your major claim is controversial, which I love, right? You don't want your essay to be boring. But if your claim is controversial, you want to immediately establish your credibility by indicating that there are going to be some ways you can rationalize this claim. So gesture towards the kind of evidence you will use. So I know this sounds a bit vague, and that's because it can be almost anything. But the way to think about gesturing towards the kind of evidence you're going to use is, are you going to be looking at some really important concepts and how the novel articulates them? Are you going to be looking at unanswered questions the novel leaves us? Are you going to look at some hypocrisies of the novel? Are you going to look at some hidden benefits of the novel that other critics haven't looked at? Just indicate the parts of the novel or the kinds of stuff in the novel you're going to focus most profoundly on. Again, that sort of foreshadows for your reader what they can expect from your essay. The problem with this is you don't know all of this until you finish writing the draft, but you can't write a draft without a working introduction. So this is how it's going to look when you submit the essay, but for you writing the draft, you need a crappy introduction that no one will ever see except your best friend or your mum or whoever is going to proofread this for you. You are going to get someone to proofread it for you, right? So with your crappy intro, you need to have some kind of idea of what your major claim is going to be and why it matters. But you probably don't need this yet. And the reason you need an idea of what your major claim is going to be is every single paragraph, including the paragraph or paragraphs that make up your methodology and your literature review, is going to have a topic sentence at the start. And your topic sentence is going to indicate where you're going to go in that paragraph and why it matters. And why it matters is hopefully that paragraph is going to support your major claim. If it doesn't, delete the paragraph, because it's literally pointless. It might be brilliantly written, you might have slaved over days on this one paragraph, hopefully you didn't, but if you did, it might be brilliant, but if it doesn't support your major claim, it's trash. The problem, of course, is that unless you have some idea of your major claim, you don't know whether or not you should be writing a particular paragraph in your essay. So you need a crappy intro. So the final introduction is going to be the last thing you write before you hand it in. You're going to do that in the editing phase. But in order to write the essay, to have functioning topic sentences, you need the crappy intro. And if you are really good, you're going to differentiate between crappy topic sentences and the topic sentences you hand in. And again, you're going to generate a real topic sentence in the editing phase, but you need a crappy topic sentence in order to actually explain to yourself as well as to the reader what the function of the paragraph is going to be. If you can't do this, your paragraph probably has no function and you need to delete it. Which again is why you have to do the editing phase. Is this draft that we're producing here, you might delete up to a third of it. I deleted over 2/3 of my PhD, so my PhD is 200 odd pages, but I definitely wrote 600 pages. I deleted 400 of them, right? It's because it was crap. Or it didn't work, it probably wasn't crap, but it didn't work very well with what I was trying to argue. Hopefully it's not going to be as bad as 2/3 for those of you watching this, but it's probably going to be a third for a lot of you. So don't waste inordinate amounts of time when you're drafting the damn thing, just crafting these beautiful sentences, because guess what? There's a 30% chance you're going to delete that sentence and no one is ever going to see it. So don't waste time making it perfect. The draft is where you sort of work out what you're going to say and how you're saying it. The editing phase is when you turn that draft into a thing of beauty. Alright, so that is the general structure. We've got about 5 minutes left, so let's introduce, I'll talk about these more next time, but let's talk about the things that scare the shit out of most people, which are the methodology and the lit review. we're not going to even mention the lit review right now, I'm just going to introduce the methodology. So a methodology just means a discussion of research method. So the way to think about this is, in science, if you had a theory about how a particular biochemical process worked, you would design an experiment to test your theory, right? So in your methodology, you would describe the method you were going to use for your experiment, I don't know, like titration or something. And then in your discussion of that method, you would rationalize for the reader of your paper why that was a good method to take, to use to investigate your theory, and what the criteria for success would be. You know, if the water turns blue, you're pregnant or something, I don't know. In the humanities, this can also be really powerful. It's just a lot harder to define than it is in the sciences. So the best way to think about it is what approach to a text is going to be productive or helpful. So let's talk about doing a feminist reading. So every single one of you, every single time you've ever written an English essay, has had a research method. The method just means your approach to the novel. Are you going to do a feminist reading? Are you going to do a Marxist reading? Are you just going to do a general close analysis of the major characters? Like, that's a method. A shit one, but it's a method. The methodology is nothing more than a space where you just validate for us, you rationalize for your reader why you're doing this approach for your essay in the first place. You need to describe your approach, and then you need to talk about why you're doing it. So let's talk about feminism. Let's say your method for analysing Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is you are going to do a feminist reading of it. So that's your method. Well, hold your horses there, ladies and gentlemen, because there are 3 waves of feminism. So which wave are you doing? 1, 2, or 3. And why? So you'll define. So you'll define how you're taking feminism for the purpose of your paper with a good source. If you are a woman, congratulations on being a woman, but that does not qualify you to define feminism. You need a source. If you're a man, you're even less well qualified, so you need a good source. But then, you need to say why you're doing a feminist reading of this damn text. Why are you doing the feminist reading? How is it going to help you draw out the meaning of the text? How is it going to help you demonstrate your understanding of the text? I mean, feminism is normally a fantastic method of reading a text, because if a text doesn't have any female characters, you're probably not, hopefully not reading it at university anyway. There are occasional exceptions, obviously. And how those characters are represented tends to tell us a lot about the text in general, but it also tells us a lot about other associated elements. So feminist readings generally take the female characters as in some ways representative of an underserved or underrepresentative or discriminated against class in the text, and that immediately also allows you to talk about class and frequently also ethnicity. So it can be a really powerful method. So the methodology is a great way for you to articulate explicitly how smart you are for taking this approach. However, it also holds you accountable. So I've just praised the feminist approach to literature. It also gives some of the worst undergraduate papers you'll ever read, where some self-satisfied student takes a text that is clearly sexist, doesn't really have any female characters, doesn't really have anything productive or useful to say about gender or feminism or anything, and then they'll spend 12 pages going on about how sexist the text is. And my response to it is, well, obviously. And if your professor ever says, well, obviously, about your essay, congratulations, it's in the trash can. So remember that your argument, your overall argument, has to be debatable. So if you spend a lot of time talking about an obviously sexist text as sexist, your argument isn't debatable, therefore you don't have an argument, therefore the maximum your argument and your essay can get is a C. So your methodology is a great way to boast about how smart you are, how well read you are, because with your good source or sources, you're also demonstrating your theoretical knowledge. Did you do Judith Butler? Did you do Hélène Cixous? Whatever. But it's also a great way to hold yourself accountable. Can you explain why you're taking the approach to the texts you are? Because if you can't, there's probably no good reason for it. And with that, I'll see you again on Friday or with these guys soon, hopefully. Thanks.